for year-end sort of 2021. This year, as you know, everything is going to be done slightly differently. I mean, first of all, we're not face-to-face or in the office. We're doing it via Teams. And if we went back a year ago, we wouldn't have envisaged we would be doing it this year. So as we're all on a computer, we're not expecting any fire alarm tests, any drills or anything this afternoon. So if you see Gemma and I suddenly get up and leave, you know that something serious has happened. What we will do, we will mute everyone during the training. Video on is optional, but please do raise your hand with the button at the top if you have a question, or in turn ask in the chat function, and we will try and answer as we go along. But if not, we are hoping to send out a list of FAQs at the end of the training, because this is the 4th session we have done now. We find that we're getting different sort of themes emerging from the first 3. So we're hoping to compile a list of FAQs, which we will mail out to you. This is the 5th year we've actually did the annual returns training, and it started initially as based on feedback we've received from yourselves as scheme employers. The feedback we've been receiving is that the employers have found it very beneficial, and from our end as pensions administrators, we have found it very helpful as well. We're finding that we're getting our returns done a lot quicker. The accuracy has improved, and we're finding the number of queries we're getting year on year has also decreased. So hopefully today we'll give you a good understanding and background of the annual allowance process and address any questions or queries you may have. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to share the presentation with you. So anyone has any problems, just let me know. Okay, folks. So what we're going to do now is obviously just give you a little background on what we hope to cover today. So we're going to look at the purpose of an annual returns of contribution, what information NILGOSC requires from you as employers, why we need that information, how this information is submitted, what happens after submission, and finally, your questions. So just to give you a bit of background, NILGOSC was established by the government in 1950 to operate a pension scheme for local councils and other similar bodies within Northern Ireland. We now have 171 employers contributing to the scheme, and that was at the 31st of March 2020. We have approximately 139,048 active, deferred and pensioner members, and currently our active members list is approximately 68,153. We're a statutory funded scheme. We're a defined benefit scheme, and the benefits are based on the length of your membership in the scheme and your career average pay from the 1st of April 2015. If you remember, prior to this, your benefits will be based on your final salary. Our benefits are set out in law and are not based on fund performance. The scheme is funded by employee and employer contributions, and the Local Government Pension Scheme Regulations Northern Ireland 2014 are the current regs governing the scheme, and they are made by the Department of Communities and administered by us. Okay, so first of all, the purpose of an annual return of pension contributions. We update our active member records as at the 31st of March each year. As employers, you submit your LGS 6s to our finance team every month, detailing employee and employer contributions, but our actual individual member records are only updated once a year with their contributions and pay details. It would be virtually impossible to update these individually. Therefore, we use a pre-populated spreadsheet to input this information directly to our members' records. In a little while, Gemma will be taking you through an example of a pre-populated spreadsheet you should have received in your mailing. So we will take you through that. Now, with the advent of the new scheme in 2015 and the arrival of CARE, this is fundamentally important, as the CARE information you provide is used to calculate exactly what pension the member has accrued in that year, And examples of why this is important will be shown later on. iConnect is a system that we are hoping to bring into place that will allow you as employers to submit monthly returns. Now, this project was on hold, but we are hoping to start it up again in 21-22 with a handful of employers. So why do we need this information? As previously stated, and one theme that will emerge today is you'll find that we will be repeating ourselves quite a lot, so please bear with us. We really need this information to update our members' records. Again, the LGS6s do come in on a monthly basis, but this is not broken down to individual member level. Updating our records is crucial, especially after the introduction of care, as these portions of the care pay form the basis of our members' actual pension benefits at retirement. We also need to check for any irregularities, so as our pension benefit statements are accurate. We will later show you an example of a pension benefit statement highlighting the key areas on the return. Okay, so what I'm going to do is give you an example here of how we actually carry out a pension calculation. So this lady here, the aptly named Mrs. Annie Returnes, has worked for her employer for 26 years. And as you can see, her scheme service is broken down into three main parts. So she has that service she accrued before the 31st of March 2009. Okay, so between April 95 and the 31st of March 09, she had accrued 14 years. From the 1st of April 09 to the 31st of March 15, in that intervening period, she's accrued 6 years. And finally, in the new care scheme between the 1st of April 15 and her date of retirement on the 31st of March 21, she had 6 years service. Now, the final salary at leaving in 2021 is £26,000. Okay. So this is the care benefits the member has accrued from the introduction of the care scheme on the 1st of April 2015. As you can see, these are actual pension amounts that are banked each year. They're revalued, and the member sees this on their benefit statement. So we take the first year there in 2015-16. Member had a pensionable remuneration of £20,000. So it's just a straight 49 to that is £408.16. Now that is revalued, and as you can see on the 31st of March 16, the CPI increase on that was a negative value, so it was negative 0.10%, and that just meant that the member banked £407.75 of pension. And you can see the following year she had £25,000, and so on and so on. So by the 31st of March 2021, this member would have banked £3,143.82 actual pension. Okay, so if we now look at her final salary benefits. So in the pre-09 scheme, she had 14 years at 1/80th times her final salary of 26,000, which was £4,550. The intervening period was 6 years times a 60th times 26,000 gives her 2,600. And as was seen in the previous slide, the care pension was £3,143.82, giving Mrs. Annie Returnes a total pension of £10,293.82. What she does have built into the scheme as well, because she has that pre-April 09 service, she automatically has the entitlement to 3/80ths as a tax-free retirement grant. So as we can see, for the 14 years times 3/80ths times £26,000 gives her a one-off lump sum payment of £13,650. So what information do we need from you as employers? Now, obviously, we need the care pay. We need the full-time equivalent pay, which is a 2009 definition of that. We need any pensionable remuneration. We need member contributions, any additional contributions, employer contributions, ABC contributions, and obviously in the past year we're going to require information on any employees you have on furlough. Now we'll now take a look at each of these in more detail. So first of all, we have care pay, which is the career average revalued earnings pay. That includes your assumed pensionable pay, contractual and non-contractual overtime, any post-15 arrears, It does, however, exclude pre-15 arrears, and the simple reason for this is that we can't allow a member to have sort of care credit in their pension for anything that relates to before care was actually care was in the scheme. Now we will take you through examples of that on the actual pre-populated spreadsheet later. And really what it is, it's basically what an employer has paid their contribution on. And as you've seen from a few slides ago, it's a pay which is actually used to bank actual pension amount. So APP, our favourite subject. So APP replaces the old notional pay, and that was the pay a member would have earned had they been in work. It covers incidents when members are on reduced or no pay as a result of, say, sickness, child-related leave, ordinary maternity, paternity, adoptive leave, or any additional maternity, paternity, or adoption leave. In the pre-15 scheme, whenever a member went on to reduce pay or no pay, the contributions, both employee and employer, were based on the actual pay received, and no service break would have been noted on the member's record. From April 15, we moved any moves to reduce pay for any of the reasons that I've listed above. The employer has to calculate APP. Basically, this is an average of a member's pay for the last 3 months or 12 weeks prior to the reduction of pay. Employers pay contributions on this amount until the member returns. Members only pay contributions on the pay they receive. Now, before the 1st of April 2015, employees and employers continue making contributions to the scheme for the first 30 days, absence with permission. So, for example, if someone was on a career break or approved unpaid leave, this regulation was not carried forward into the 2015 scheme, and several employers have requested its reinstatement as they were having to set up hundreds of small additional pension contribution contracts to cover breaks over very short periods, and often this was maybe for just one day. So new regulations come into force on the 18th of November 2019, which state that when an employee is absent from work with permission and receiving no or reduced pay, the employee and employer will continue to make contributions on the pay they would have received but for the member's absence. If the absence is for 30 consecutive days or less, contributions are made to cover the period of the absence. If the absence is longer than 30 consecutive days, contributions are made for the first 30 days of the absence only. Now, care pay and contributions must include the APP on the first 30 days. You'll find examples of this calculation on our website. Okay, so full-time equivalent pay. Had the member worked full-time weekly hours in that post, what pay they would have earned in their working year. So that would exclude non-contractual overtime. I should point out here, a lot of you probably have casual employees or employees on career breaks. For those members, we still require a full-time equivalent pay for the purposes of the annual benefit statement. And probably the simplest way of calculating that there is just take the hourly rate times the full-time hours for the post times the number of weeks. So in effect, say £10 by 36 by 52 weeks, and that would give us the whole time equivalent pay. What we're doing now, when the new scheme came in 2015, we no longer required sort of notification on any hour changes for a member, but with the advent of sort of McLeod and also with respect to the underpin, we do now require information on any hour changes the member may have. Okay, give you some examples here of full-time equivalent pay and how we calculate it. So the first one's very straightforward. We have a member earning £2,000 per month for a 36-hour week contract. So this is quite straightforward. It's the 2,000 by 12 months. It's £24,000. The second one is for a part-time employee working 20 hours over 36. Let's just calculate it with the £1,200 times 12 months times 36 over 20 gives a whole time pay of 25,920. And the final example are, you'll see a part-time turn time employee earning £125 a week for working 12 hours over a 36 36 hours whole time working week. So it's £125 times 43.2 times 36 over 12, which equals £16,200. Okay, furlough. So as you all know, this is a relatively new thing in the scheme, and furlough pay just arises under the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, which is where an employer may keep an employee on the payroll even though they are unable to operate or have no work for that employee to do because of COVID-19. Now, the employer can pay 80% of an employee's wages up to a monthly cap of £2,500. Employers may top this up above 80%. This is known as being on furlough. Now, the government has confirmed that it does not expect public sector organisations such as councils to use this scheme other than in some very limited circumstances. However, we have seen a number of these coming through, and there are a number of questions have been raised as a result of this. I should direct you to the NILGOSC website where there's a very good FAQ section if you have any further sort of queries on that. Now, furlough pay is pensionable under the regulations, so employee and employer contributions should be deducted based on the actual pay the furloughed employee receives. Assumed pensionable pay does not apply in these circumstances. Now, members who build up care pension based on the actual pay received, if the furlough pay is 80% of what the member would normally receive, then the pension they will build up will be 80% of what they normally would have built up. Now, the member can choose to buy additional pension to make up for the pension that was lost. The employer may split this with the employee, but you're not obliged to do so. So employers, you may need to check your policy statements regarding this discretion. Now, any pension benefits that a member may have that are final salary benefits sort of relating to membership before the 1st of April 2015 are usually calculated on the final year's pay or the best one in the last 3 if an earlier pay is higher. Now, that should prevent the final salary element of a member's pay being affected by being on furlough. It is also sometimes possible that where a member's final salary pay in a continuous period of employment is reduced or restricted, the average of any 3 consecutive years' pay in the last 10 may be used if that is higher. So furlough pay forms part or all of the member's pensionable pay. It should be used to determine the employee contributions rate at the 1st of April 2020. Now, it is also possible for an employee to relocate a member to a different band during the year. If they do so, they must inform the member, and employers may wish to check their policy on allocation to contribution bands. And if you have a look for more information on section 2.2 of the Employer's Guide for more information on contribution banding. Okay, so how is that information submitted? Excel spreadsheets are pre-populated with all the employees we hold as active during the year April to March. They are sent out by our IT department in February, early March. And again, I can't emphasize enough how important this is that they must be resubmitted to NILGOSC by the 30th of April 2021. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over to Gemini and she will take you through an example of our pre-pop spreadsheet.
Hi everyone, the fun part now begins, as they say. I just want to say on behalf of myself and the team, I want to say thank you for last year, first of all. Last year was very hard with most of you working from home, including myself at that point in time, but we got a lot of the work done on time, so I just want to say a big thank you from us on that. I'm going to take you through the spreadsheet column by column. Most of you hopefully have received it. I will send the notes that I'm going to more or less regurgitate now out to you, so you can follow it if you miss anything. So we'll start off with columns A to K. So that's your national insurance number right through to your scheme number. This is pre-populated by ourselves. So this is every member, active member that was in the scheme from the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March 2021. On these rows, and in these columns, you can change the information if required. So if the wrong national insurance number is there, or the surname has changed, the date of birth is wrong, please amend. And you'll hear me talk about this AS column, which is comments column. It's at the very end of the spreadsheet. Please just put a note in there to say what you've changed and what you've changed it to. This AS column will be the best thing ever for us in the long run. One thing to note on it is column H. Column H is the date left pensionable service. So this is when a member has officially left the scheme. So they're no longer paying into the scheme. This will be pre-populated if we know the date of leaving. If we don't know the date of leaving, please put the date of leaving in there, and hopefully this will prompt you also to send an LGS 15 as soon as possible. The reason for this is we actually want to defer the benefit before they get an active statement, so they're not getting information that actually they're not entitled to. So if there's no date of leaving, please input there and send an LGS 15 as soon as possible. If there are members on or not on the spreadsheet that should be, please populate at the bottom of the spreadsheet, but leave the reference number blank. This in turn will prompt you to send an automatic enrolment spreadsheet with the new member, and we will process that immediately. We should have somebody dedicated in the team, like we did last year, to do any automatic enrolment that needs done urgently for annual return purposes. Once we get the annual return or the automatic enrolment spreadsheet processed, we can then input the reference number to the pre-pop for you, providing it's not hundreds. We can do that for you. So if you just put the information on as you would do for all the other members, but just leave the reference number blank, we can just send the spreadsheet in for the automatic enrolment. Columns L to N is your main care dates and care pay. Usually these dates will be the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March 2021, but there are a few cases where this will be different. Row 22 is Philip Thompson. He has left on the 24th of January 2021. So his main care to date has been changed from the 31st of March 21 to the 24th of January 2021, as that's his date of leaving. In the same instance, if we have a mid-year joiner, so row 27 is Deborah Franklin. She joined on the 11th of the 1st, 2021, and that date obviously has changed from the 1st of April 2020. So it's the way that it has to be input onto our system as well, to show them when they joined and when they left the scheme. So that's the only occasion when those two dates will change. Column O is the main contributions. Main contribution, this are the employee contributions paid in the financial year in the main scheme. It excludes 50/50, as you can see, columns P to R include or for the 50/50. Peter, do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Yeah, no, it's just a very quick one, Gemma. As you know, the way our mid-month payroll works, those from and to dates for care pay are slightly different.
Yep.
You know, and I know what you're saying, but it's just that ours will obviously run just the way that payroll runs. It's actually from March to February. The way
yes, we know with yours, Peter. That's fine.
We're just a bit strange that way. Yeah.
We'll still put it in as the 31st of March 2021 for the boards, but we know that you use your mid-years or use earlier than that, so that's not a problem.
Okay, grand.
We do the same with our 15s.
Yeah.
Yep. So columns, columns P, Q, and R and S obviously is for 50/50 scheme. So if you've somebody in the 50/50 scheme and not the main scheme, then you just complete the 50/50 part of this spreadsheet. Now, rows 8 and 9 is an example of a member who's gone from main scheme to 50/50 and back into the main scheme again. The dates cannot overlap. So as you see in row 8, it goes from the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of August 2020. They were in the main scheme. 50/50 scheme then from the 1st September 2020 to the 31st of December, 2020. And then they went back into the main scheme the 1st of January 2021 to the end of the year, 31st of March 2021. Just to make a note that the care pay isn't halved, it's only the contributions that are halved, and the employer contributions still stay at the normal 19.5%. It's only the employees' contributions that are halved. One thing to note is as well, I probably didn't say at the start, we don't expect any member to have 2 lines for the same reference number. This will be the only case that they will, because they've gone from one scheme to the other and back in again. If a member has two lines in the one reference number, it would indicate to us 2 jobs, and that an automatic enrolment spreadsheet would need to be submitted to get a different reference number for one of those jobs. So each member, for each job they have, should have an individual reference number. This is the only case where we would find they have 2 lines for the one reference number, is when they've gone in and out of the main scheme on 50/50. Column T seems to cause a lot of problems for everybody. It's one of the ones that we have to fix a lot of the time. This is the full-time equivalent pay. Sean's already talked about it in the presentation on how to calculate it. This is what we need and will be shown on the annual benefit statement. So this is if a member, what their pay would be if they were working full-time, for instance 36 or 37 hours or 32.5, and their contractual weeks. So if they're 52 weeks, then that's what it'll be based on. If they're 44.4 or term time, it'll be based on their term time weeks, but their full-time hours. Their pensionable REM, column U, this is where we'll show if a member is actually part-time, because obviously this is what they actually pay contributions on. In here, you will notice if people are sick or being on maternity leave, because obviously it'll be lower. And in some cases, you will find that their pension remuneration will be lower than their main care pay in column N. So row 12 will be an example of this. This member has got a higher care pay than their pension remuneration. So their care pay is 15,165.28, and their pension remuneration is 6,935.63. If Sean scrolls the whole way across to my famous AS column, you will see I have put a note in there, if it's following yet. APP from the 5th of May 2020 to the 27th of the 3rd 2021. So we would expect that to be right. If it's not, we wouldn't question why one is lower than the other or one's higher than the other. One thing I have to note is what we find as well from a lot of employers is the employers will pay on the APP but not actually put the APP amount into the care. They'll just leave it the same as the pension remuneration. So please make aware that the care pay goes into the member's pension pot, so it needs to be included in the care pay if you're paying on APP for a member. Pension remuneration, it'll not include. Sorry, your care pay will include overtime, any overtime that they're doing as well. So just to be aware of that. So it's not included in the full-time equivalent unless it's contractual. Anything else will go into their care pay. Column V is your employee APCs. These are slowly dying out. I'm sure the boards are very happy with this. Hopefully there shouldn't be too many. If you know the amounts, can you please put them in there? These won't include AVCs or the additional membership contracts or ARCS contracts. These are just specifically for the APCs because we have separate columns for the other information. As you can see, column W is our additional contributions. So this would be for the old style ARCS, the old style added years. It excludes AVCs and APCs, as I've said before. I've put a wee example in there of 2,143.56, and in my comments I've just said, what have I said? Added years payment, the old added years payment. So then when it comes to it, we'll know that's what that's for. That's not just not a random payment. We know it's for something specific. Columns X to AI. Now this is going to really contradict what I'm saying, probably, but our spreadsheet goes from left to right. When we're doing the contribution rates, it goes from right to left. Just when we upload the spreadsheet to our system, is the way it seems to populate it. So we have given you room for 4 different contribution bands. So contribution 1 end date should normally always be the 31st of March 2021. There's a couple of examples there, obviously. So row 15, I'll give you the example of a member started the year from the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of December 2020 on 6.5%. So that has been input in contribution 2 end date and amount and rate. And then contribution 1, they've moved to 8.5. So from the 1st of January 2020 to the 31st of March 2021, sorry, to 31st of March 2021, it's moved to 8.5. So it's been input on contribution 1 end date. I hope that makes sense to you. We've given you room for 4. I know in some cases, very rare, there's more than 4. If there is more than 4, please just group them together. So if you have 3 months, but they're all different months at 5.5, group them together. If you have 3 other months and they're all different, they're not in line with each other, please just group them together and we'll take it that way rather than doing 12 different contribution changes. As long as we have the amounts there and there has been changes throughout the year that we know of, then that'll be suffice. Okay, column AJ. Column AJ is the next year's contribution rate. This is not mandatory, so it doesn't need to be completed. If you know it, fill it in. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. Basically, we understand with pay rises and things from the 1st of April, and depending on when you've got the annual return and things in, you may not know what their contribution band is. So yes, you can leave that blank, so it doesn't need to be filled in. Column AK is the employer rate. For most of you, will be 19.5%. I know some of maybe the smaller schools or some of the different employers that we have, they won't be 19.5. Just whatever your employer contribution rate is, you put that in there. AL is your employer's contributions. We expect this to be 19.5 or whatever your contribution rate is of the care pay that you have in column N. So this is where we would see if you haven't put your APP in your care pay, because this will flag up to us that you've paid a lot of contributions, but your care pay is so much lower. We would, if there's no comments, we would query why is your employer contributions a lot higher. We would assume it would be APP, but obviously we just would need clarification on that. So that's why I'm saying use that comment section AS a lot for anything. Column AM is your employer APCs, which is self-explanatory. If you have any, please put them in there. Columns AN and AO is our AVC part. So we know Prudential has to be paid directly from the employer, but we have to input the information onto our system. Equitable Life is also one that we pay directly ourselves, not from your employer. So we need to know exactly what amount needs to be paid over or should have been paid over. Row 15 there, I've put 1,950 in Equitable Life, and you'll see through the reconciliation tab that it's been pulled through to that. So we need to know those for updating purposes. Columns AP to AR is your pre-15 arrears from, to, and the amount. I'm hoping there are very little of these now, and since we're 6 years in, but there is the odd case that we will have some arrears. Arrears have been paid during the year for a period pre-15. These do not form part of the care pay, but will increase the final salary. Employer and employee will pay contributions on them. Any arrears paid for the periods of employment after the 1st of 15 are just credited to the care pay in the year that they've paid. So basically, if it's a pre-15, we just need to know the amount, but it shouldn't be included in the care pay. I think there is a row, for example, I can't remember which one it is. There's a row that I have put an example in, and I've just put in the comments arrears paid for pre-15. Column AS is our famous comment section. What I should say as well, any comment that is put on the annual return in AS will be put onto a memo onto the member's record. This helps us at the start with validation, but also helps us when we actually post to the member's record if there's errors that come up. For instance, if somebody has got a promotion or a demotion, it'll be explain why the full-time equivalent is lower or higher than the previous year for us. So all I could say is use and abuse the AS column. Write as much or as little as you want, but any information that you provide in there is more helpful to us in the long run, and hopefully will minimise the amount of queries that we get either side of the process. Columns AT to AU are the employee and employer's contribution check. The employee validation checks that the employee contributions shown in column Y are the correct contribution rates shown in column Z of the pension remuneration in column U for an individual. Basically, we want to know that you've paid the right contribution band, or the contribution you've stated you've paid the right contributions on what the member has paid. So in most cases, in an ideal world, you'll want every single one to say okay. We know that's not what happens, but I said if you put a comment in to say why there's a discrepancy or why this is too low or too high, we'll be more than happy with that. For instance, row 6, the employee has underpaid by £8.17 will be deducted in the year, should be 2021-22. The employee contribution check has said too low, but because you've told us you've underpaid, we will accept that. We do have tolerances within the employee-employer contributions, which will accept some higher, some lower, but there might be other cases where they're way out or way off. Example for not including the APP in the care, then the employer contribution check will be way off, saying too high or too low. Column AV is the care check. This column checks that the contribution amounts are based on the total main and 50/50 care totals and the sum of the employee contribution amounts if there are no pre-15 arrears. So basically it's just checking the contributions that you are the care pay that you have stated and the contributions they have paid are matching. Just a few things to note on the spreadsheet before we move on to the next tab is Sean's already covered it. Casuals, yes, we need FTEs for casuals and anybody on a career break. It won't allow us to produce a benefit statement otherwise. So it's hourly rate of pay, whole time hours and their contractual weeks, if that's what it is. We'll use that because obviously if they're all care, then it just goes into their pension pot. But we need an FTE in case there's some pre-15 service that you may not know about because it's come from another file or they've transferred in service that's pre-15. So we need a full-time equivalent for that. I've already said about duplicate lines and separate contracts. Yep, we can only have one line for one reference number. Reactivated files, some of you may or may not know about this. Excuse me. If somebody has got a deferred benefit and we've reactivated the file because they've rejoined again, we may have written to you to say use the old reference number. Keep these in mind and that's what we'll be using. So if you see an old reference number, have a double check to see if we've told you to change it or use the old reference number, because sometimes it does muck up the validation if you change the reference number to the new one that we've potentially got rid of as well. To make you aware as well, My NILGOSC Pension Online is now our portal for where members can go and see what they actually, what their figures are. So they can see the figures at the 31st of March 2021 it will be. So they'll be able to see their full-time equivalent and their care pay, and they'll be able to play about on the website if they're coming up to retirement and things to do quotes. So if you've provided us with the wrong information and it's not picked up at either end, but ourselves or use, the member could potentially have benefits or looking at benefits that they're not entitled to. So that's why it's vitally important that we get this right first time, or as much as first time as possible at the validation stage. What forms do you need to send in? I've talked about the LGS 15 if you've got a date of leaving present. Automatic enrollment spreadsheet if you need a new reference number. LGS 25s can be used for R changes and if they have a post ID change. LGS 15s are not required for those. We basically would need an LGS 25 or a spreadsheet telling us the change of post ID that we sent to our admin 1 team. They deal with those. So basically a date of leaving shouldn't be input if they've changed post ID. Okay. Finance reconciliation tab on the pre-pop that you get. This is for our finance department, for them to more or less reconcile what you have sent in your LGS 6s to what you've told us on the annual return. So at the top, you will have see it'll go from April to March, and this has the employee contributions, employer contributions, employee APCs, employee additional contributions, employee AVCs, and then the totals. So each of your LG6s will be inputted here with the information you've supplied and the totals at the bottom. You can see there's an annual return total line underneath, and this is pre-populated from the annual return tab of the pre-pop. You'll have noticed at the top of your pre-pop in the black line, there will be running totals for your employee, employer contributions, etc. So this is trying to basically match up what you've told us at the 31st of March 2021 matches with what you have supplied to us every month in your LGS 6. In an ideal world, you would hope to see the difference being 0, 0, 0, but in some cases that's not, and that's fine. We have a comments box underneath that, so any discrepancies, just put a comment in. It's the same way for the annual return. For instance, like we've put the Equitable Life AVCs there, that's what the 1950 is, which is fine. There might have been refunds throughout the year that haven't been processed, etc., etc. Any comments that will help us decipher what the differences are, because when the process does begin, once we've done our part as an annual return team, finance have to do theirs before we can actually let the annual return be posted on the members' records. So finance have to sign off on it as well as ourselves. Have you got the copy? Yeah. Well, the next part. So what happens next, basically? Sean's going to pull up the benefit statement, basically. So what happens next is, so when we get the receive the annual return, we go through the process of the validation. Validation software was introduced in the year 15-16. It tested our software to the limit, I have to say, but over the past couple of years, and I think we've got it down to a T now, almost anyway, that it basically calculates any errors that we may have before posting it to a member's record. So a lot of the question earlier on, a lot of the things that come up are missing FTEs or wrong FTEs if it's part-time, missing care, missing reference numbers, things that don't match up with what we possibly have on our Altair system. We want to do it at this stage, like get as many queries out of the way as possible before we post to the members record, because it just becomes more difficult then, changing records and things. So it's easier to do it this stage. Well, we as a team have found it easier to do it this stage. So once we have our annual return team have signed off on the at the start and process of the validation and got the queries back from yourselves, and we're happy with the return, it goes to finance for them to clear. They do their part of matching up the reconciliation. Once they're happy, we send it to IT. IT then will post each individual member's data onto their file, and then that creates more queries, as you might turn, because what happens is, you may or may not know, but our data will compare last year's to this year's. For instance, what I was saying earlier on is if somebody has got a full-time equivalent that is higher or lower than the previous year, and it's outside our tolerances, it will flag up an error to us, and we will query why the full-time equivalent has dropped or why it has increased. If the comment is on in our AS comments section on our annual return, the answer will be there. They've been promoted or they've been demoted. We will not question that. We'll just go tick on our sheet. So basically, that's why I'm saying to you, and I will emphasize a lot, comments. So that's the kind of thing that brings up. It will look at the employee and employer contributions as well. It's a big thing that comes up. And also our care pay, depending on if you have or haven't paid on the APP as well. So once we're happy enough, we've queried with you on the other side of the process, when it's on the member's record, we're happy enough, signed it all off, we've cleared everything, then this is what our final product is. It's our benefit statement that Sean has put up on screen. It has 8 pages of guidance notes. I'm sure you've all been possibly received one and thrown the guidance notes out, but they are very useful to go through each section of the benefit statement to explain in a bit more detail what each section means. Because if you're in the scheme for a long time, you've got 3 sets of regulations to fall under. You fall under the 80th, the 60th, and obviously the care. So our benefit statement has become quite complicated, so those guidance notes are vital. So the information is personal details, so it's just the member's name, reference number, date of birth, the employer, the date they joined the scheme, which is obviously on your pre-pop, and then below it shows you the care pay and the pensionable pay, and that, or the final salary pensionable pay, which is actually your full-time equivalent from your annual return. So this is what I'm saying. If you put in a full-time equivalent of 50,000 and they only earn 27, then their benefits are going to be projected and inflated. So if we haven't caught it, either end, not just yourselves or our end, if we haven't caught it either, then the member will be thinking they're entitled to a lot more money than they should be. So it's just to make you aware. Section 2 shows you the summary of benefits that they've built up to, it'll be to the 31st of March 2021. So it shows their current pension, their current tax-free lump sum, if they're entitled to one, and then their survivor's pension. Section 3 is just a breakdown of each regulation. Excuse me. It shows you how to calculate their care and how their final salary benefits are calculated to end up with their total pension, and then how their lump sum is calculated also. Section 4 is their projected value of benefits. So what we do, and hence why I'm always talking about the FTE being correct, we project benefits to their normal pension age. So if somebody is close to retirement and they've got the wrong FTE there, they will be thinking they're entitled to something different. If they're 30 years down the line like myself, I'll not be bothering too much, but at the same time, it'll be wrong. So their total projected benefits, pension and lump sum will be there as well to their normal pension age. We give a wee bit in section 5 about death benefits, built up to the 31st of March 21. And so there's more information you can find on our website, as well as the 8-page guidance note, which, as I said, are good to go through as well. So that's the end of the spreadsheet. You'll be glad to hear. We have to get the benefit statements out by the 31st of March or 31st of August each year. It's a statutory requirement. Sean will talk about that. But our deadline normally to complete things is by the middle of July, and that's because we have to, one, get all the information gathered and looked at and checked by so many people for what actually goes in the benefit statement, because of the calculations that it needs to do for like the survivors' benefits. Then it has to go to the printers, and then obviously has to be then sent out. So it's a long process for us. It's a short window for us to actually get to that stage, but we do 2 runs, but one is normally the middle of July, and then one at the start of August. So it is vitally important. The quicker you get the annual return in, the better for both of us. But I will throw you back to Sean now. He will take you through the last wee bit of a long afternoon.
Okay, folks, thanks for your patience. You'll be glad to know we've only a few more slides to go, and then we'll take your questions. So what I want to talk about now is a little bit about the pension admin strategy. Now, I'm sure you'll all be familiar with this. Now, the pension admin strategy was implemented in October 2017, and it was just really to highlight the responsibilities of NILGOSC and the scheme's employing authorities when carrying out their respective scheme functions. Now, the strategy sets out the service standards and performance targets for NILGOSC as a scheme administrator and the scheme employers. Now, the strategy includes a charging schedule, which lays out the issues in which NILGOSC feel necessary to charge. One of the charges on the schedule is the administration costs are over and above any routine administration costs. For example, issuing reminders about annual returns not submitted by the 30th of April. Now, we suspended the pension admin strategy last year because of COVID, but we have been informed that we will be resuming everything again this year. So we will be forced to issue fines for late submissions of annual returns. But knowing all you guys there, I'm sure you'll have everything in by the 30th of April. Just to go back on something Gemma had mentioned, I mean, a lot of the emphasis and this here, it's leading to the goal, and the goal is to get our member records updated and to get the pension benefit statements out. If we don't issue our pension benefit statements by the end of August, we could find ourselves being fined by the pension regulator. And if it transpires that the reason there was a delay in getting those issued was caused by information being withheld by employers, NILGOSC can pass those fines on. So it is vitally important that everything does come into us by the 30th of April. Annual allowance. Now, the annual allowance is a new part we have added into the training. I think this is the second year we have had the annual allowance stuff in, but it is only maybe sort of to help you do this and the annual return sort of in one go. Now, as you know, we run the annual allowance exercise each year. Now, this can be done once the annual return process is complete and the annual benefit statements have been processed, and this is normally around late August, early September. Now, we understand this can be frustrating for you, as you'll have just answered all your annual return queries and then maybe get some more queries relating to annual allowances, but the timing, unfortunately, is unavoidable. Now, to attempt to minimise queries for annual allowance, we are asking if you could submit an additional spreadsheet for the annual allowance purposes. Now, what we would require is the pensionable pay for 5 days. Now, those 5 days will be April 1st to April 5th, and it'll be particularly for higher earning individuals. Now, other important items to include would be any members receiving sort of PRP, and a separate tab would need to be used to include the last 3 years PRP. Now, a general rule of thumb for this would be that the following members likely to be affected by this and who would require this information would be for members who have previously required information for annual allowance, new members who are high earners, and members who have a substantial pay increase and or hold a lot of scheme service. Now, the annual allowance calculation itself can be very complex, and it is vital that the calculations are correct, as there are tax implications for our members and there may be tax charges applied. Now, the additional information is no guarantee that NILGOSC won't contact employers with queries, but it is in the hope that it will minimise how much we have to contact you. Now, any queries specifically about the annual allowance process, you should contact Pensions Development at pensionsdevelopment@nilgosc.org.uk, and a point of contact there would be Richard Clark. So finally, just to summarise some of the main points that we've sort of covered today. So the deadline is still the 30th of April, and our pension benefit statements will go out before the 30th of August. Fines will be implemented again for late submission or extra admin duties. Automatic enrolment, if you have no reference number, then submit the automatic enrolment spreadsheet and send directly to the automatic enrolment mailbox. Same as the opt-outs. Now, in the past, a lot of the automatic enrolment stuff has come through to the annual returns team. We're not allowed to accept those, so we have to return those to the employers, and then they need to go to the annual returns team, or the team specifically dealing with that. Now, we do hope to have a member of the team this year dealing directly with automatic enrolment. So the information does come in, that should be processed fairly quickly. Data leaving, only use if a member has left and not changed posts. Casuals career breaks require full-time equivalent salary. So again, just simple as the hourly rate times the full-time hours times the number of weeks worked. The circular will go out before the end of February. Please try and remember the annual allowance data and what forms are needed for which situations. So thanks very much, folks, for your patience. I take it there are lots of questions.